Five, four, three, two, one. We are live. Coming to you live. It's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
We're in a war. We're in the midst of a war. Make no mistake about it. This is a war. It is an undeclared war. It is a war without authorization from the Congress of the United States, launched as a war of choice by one man and one man only, Donald Trump, who, along with his bloodthirsty Secretary of Defense, he would call it Secretary of War, seemed to care nothing about the human damage wrought by this war. They seem to care nothing about more than 150 school children and others killed in an errant strike in Iran. They seem to care nothing about more than 1,000 persons in Iran killed. Who knows how many of them had absolutely nothing to do with this regime, not to mention some 13 American troops killed, over 100 wounded. That seems not to matter one whit to President Trump or Secretary Hegseth. In fact, horrifically, Secretary Hegseth seems to revel in the carnage and in the destruction and not have an ounce of empathy in his body.
There is some good news today.
Good news, Sam?
It's my mother's birthday.
Wow.
So happy birthday to my mom.
Happy birthday to my wife.
Right. But unfortunately, there is some bad news to also cover tonight.
There's always bad news. Seems to hit us every single day.
The Iran war continues. President Trump's director of National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, announced his immediate resignation, citing the decision to begin a war against Iran when, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. That's pretty big.
This is huge. Joe Kent is not some liberal plant who somehow snuck into the Trump administration. Joe Kent is a dyed-in-the-wool MAGA loyalist. He ran twice for Congress unsuccessfully as a Republican, portraying himself as an unstinting supporter of Donald Trump. He has been unwavering in his support of Donald Trump's lies that the 2020 election was somehow stolen from him. He shares Donald Trump's totally false and misleading view about the so-called patriotic assault on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. He has even suggested that somehow federal agents were involved in staging that attempted coup. So I just want to stress, we're not talking about someone who wants to go after Donald Trump, who is out of step with the Donald Trump agenda, who has not been lined up with Donald Trump over the last several years.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. In fact, he's a convert. He used to be a libertarian, used to be very briefly perhaps a Democrat, although that's in question. And there is nothing more zealous or staunch than a convert. You would be hard-pressed to look within the Trump administration to find a more loyal MAGA stalwart than Joe Kent. And that makes his resignation particularly significant and especially significant in light of the revelations that he provided. Keep in mind, he's not some outsider. He was at the heart of the American intelligence operation. Even before he became head of counterintelligence under Director of National Security Tulsi Gabbard, he was briefly her chief of staff. So he was right in the inner circle of the American intelligence community. And he knew exactly what their findings and what their conclusions were. And just as important as his resignation, and by the way, this is far from the only resignation in the second Trump administration. We've had a parade of registrations from the Department of Justice.
Resignations.
What did I say?
You
know, I'm a little old and a little dyslexic. Resignations from the Department of Justice, including the acting U.S. attorney for the acclaimed Southern District of New York, perhaps the most famous, the most important U.S. district in the country. So this, and we've had, resignations from the from ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. So this is not new, but it's particularly important because it comes in the middle of this undeclared war. And he said two things of overriding paramount importance. One we've already heard. In fact, both of them we've already heard right here on this show. Number one, Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. No imminent threat. He said, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. And it is clear, this is the second thing he said, which you've also heard on this show. It is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I have to say here, I'm no fan of Joe Kent. I've been a strong opponent of his. And he has been associated with anti-Semitism before. And talking about pressure from the American lobby for Israel is a classic anti-Semitic argument. Goes all the way back to Pat Buchanan decades ago, who talked about Israel's Amen Corner among pro-Israel lobbyists in the United States. So I'm not buying into the claims of someone who I think has been tainted by anti-Semitism. But we can put that aside and just look at the substance of what he is saying. I repeat, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. That's not just the personal opinion of a casual observer. That is someone lodged in the heart of the American intelligence community, reporting on what the intelligence community has found. In all the rhetoric and all the words from Donald Trump trying to justify this war, Sam, has he presented any credible evidence that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States?
No.
And that's really important because under the law, the only way the president can act unilaterally without congressional approval, and remember, under the Constitution, which branch of government, Sam, has the power to declare war? Is it the president?
No.
No, it's the Congress. President can certainly act when a foreign nation poses an imminent threat to the United States. But clearly that was not the case here.
So they're just straight up lying.
Straight up lying. And exposed by this MAGA loyalists. Not, some deranged lunatic liberal. Someone as loyal to Trump and as loyal to the MAGA movement as you could possibly find within the Trump administration. Much more so, for example, than Marco Rubio, who, until he blackened his soul, was a critic of Donald Trump. Not true, Joe Kent. No imminent threat.
I mean, it's great that this guy, Joe Kent, confirmed what we already knew, but all you had to do is just follow the rhetoric coming from Trump's mouth. Again, this summer, they bombed Iran. He said that they obliterated all their capabilities. 6 months later, they're now an imminent threat. That alone, just following that rhetoric, you gotta be like, huh?
But it's nice to get inside confirmation. That's my point.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. Trump said they obliterated their ability to make a nuclear. That's his word, obliterated, wiped it out. And yet he's among, who knows how many conflicting justifications. You can't even keep up with them. We need to stop them from developing a nuclear weapon. Let's assume for the moment that once again Trump was lying. Not a difficult assumption, right, Sam?
Very easy assumption.
And they didn't obliterate the ability of Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. They just substantially diminished it. Again, not myself, but experts in the field have said, under the best case scenario, Iran, assuming they're ever going to develop a nuclear weapon, and that's certainly not a clear assumption, but assuming they're ever going to develop a nuclear weapon, they are not weeks, not months, but many years away from being able to develop a nuclear weapon. Second thing they were saying about Iran posing an imminent threat to the United States was that they were developing missiles. You heard that, Sam?
Right.
Capable of reaching the United States. Whether that's true or not, who knows? Let's say it's true. Again, what experts in the field, not me, have said, they are not weeks, they are not months, they are many years away, if ever, from developing such weapons. So all of that is abject nonsense. I hate when the media says Trump claims this without evidence. God knows. No, Trump claims this
Oh my God.
contrary
Right.
to all the evidence. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
The media needs to say Trump claims this in contradiction to the evidence, not
Right.
that Trump claims this without evidence. That's a much weaker and much less accurate statement.
Right.
So Joe Kent is right. And you didn't need Joe Kent to say this. We've been saying this, for weeks
Right.
on the show, analyzing their nuclear threat and their missile threat. In fact, what country actually has, and it's a rogue dictatorship as bad as the Iranian dictatorship, what country actually has nuclear weapons and a robust military program? North Korea. And you don't see Trump attacking North Korea, do you, Sam?
You keep going back to this North Korea thing.
Because
every
they
week.
pose a vastly more serious threat.
I don't disagree with that, but I also don't think they pose that big of a threat.
No,
either.
but much bigger than Iran.
Right.
If he's going to argue Iran, is going to attack the United States and obliterate our cities and what have you, a much more credible threat is North Korea. North Korea is also relevant because Trump has kissed up to the bloody, murderous dictator Kim Jong-un. And what has he done in response to, Trump's love letters? Did he curtail his nuclear weapons program, Sam?
Not that I know of.
He accelerated it. Did he curtail his missile program? No, he accelerated. Trump was being played like a fiddle by this horrible, bloody, awful dictatorship who poses a vastly greater threat to the United States than Iran does. Why wouldn't we attack North Korea, Sam? Because they have nuclear weapons. We have never attacked a nuclear-armed country. Look at the countries we've attacked: Venezuela, Somalia, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. Do any of these countries have nuclear weapons?
No.
No. We have never attacked a country with nuclear weapons, which leads to a pretty chilling conclusion. Let us presume, as again, most experts in Iranian politics tell us, that unless we occupy the country with ground troops, we are not likely to dislodge the regime. Right, Sam?
Right.
You can't bomb the regime out of existence. That's never worked. And presuming this war has got to end at some point, although who knows, that the regime is even more entrenched, this episode, instead of undermining Iran's nuclear ambitions, is going to accelerate Iran's nuclear ambitions, because they're going to know the only way they're going to protect themselves from American aggression is by becoming a nuclear power like North Korea. The other part of what Kent had to say was that same thing we've been saying on this show for some time, that Trump was being played by Netanyahu. Leave aside the anti-Semitic overtones, which I, vigorously denounce. Again, he's at the heart of American intelligence, and he's verified what we've concluded just from the publicly available information, that everything that's going on benefits Netanyahu. This was Netanyahu's dream. First devastate Gaza and the Palestinians, then devastate Iran. What does the United States get out of this, Sam? Absolutely nothing except, wreckage to our economy, over 100 troops wounded, 13 killed, to carry the water of Netanyahu. And we've seen this scenario time and time again, right? Trump claims to be this great tough guy, the leader of the world. And we've seen him played like a fiddle by Kim Jong-un. We love one another. We've exchanged these great love letters. We have this great relationship. And Kim has just gone on to accelerate his nuclear program, his missile program. We've seen that with Putin. I'm giving him a deadline to reach a peace agreement with Ukraine. Well, God knows how many months it's been since that deadline. Putin has done nothing except step up his attacks on Ukraine, killing countless numbers of civilians. And what has Trump done, Sam?
Not much.
Worse. He lifted the oil sanctions on Russia. It's one of the reasons I've said there are two big beneficiaries of this war, and it ain't the U.S. Already talked about Netanyahu. It's also Putin. This war is a godsend. How many Russians are being killed in Iran? None. It's only Americans, Iranians, and then people in the Gulf states and Israel. No consequences for Putin. And his failing economy is being bailed out because what's happened to the price of oil, Sam? Whoop, 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 whoop. And what does the Russian economy depend upon? Oil. He's bailed out the failed Russian economy and stepped up its ability to wage the war in Ukraine, where America really does have some national direct interest. Plus, he's lifted the sanctions, enabling Putin to sell more oil, further boosting the failing Russian economy and increasing the ability of Russia to wage war in Ukraine. The other reason Putin is smiling all the way to his vacation home in Russia is that with the United States focused on the Middle East, expending our armaments on the Middle East, what does that mean, Sam, for our support for Ukraine?
Goes away.
Right down the drain. So Putin benefits doubly. Number one, Trump has bailed out his failing economy, boosting his ability to conduct his murderous war crime assault on Ukraine. And number two, diminish the ability of the United States to bolster the capacity of the Ukrainians to fight against the Russians. Netanyahu benefits, Trump benefits. We in America only pay a price without becoming any safer and maybe less safe. Some have argued China also benefits, and that's a bit of a mixed bag. Certainly in one aspect, China benefits enormously. America's bogged down in the Middle East. It's expending its short supply of armaments, which would mean America is much worse positioned to resist a mainland Chinese assault on what island, Sam?
Taiwan.
Now, I don't know if China is going to do this, but certainly Trump's actions have put them in a vastly better position to try to take Taiwan, which has been a goal of the communist regime in mainland China for many decades. Again, that is vastly more important to American strategic interests. I would say 10-1 as compared to any strategic interests that we have in Iran, yet we've debilitated our ability to defend Iran, to pursue this feckless war, to defend Taiwan, to pursue this feckless war in Iran. As a good MAGA, Kent has also made a third point that he and other MAGAs expected Donald Trump to cash in on his promise. What did he promise about wars, Sam, and about fighting wars? That he would go ahead and fight all these wars like the Democrats did?
He did not say he was going to do that. He said
the
the
opposite. I'm going to stop wars, not fight wars. Kemp said, until June of 2025, you understood that wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed Americans of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. Robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. Kent and other MAGAs thought Trump understood that, and that's why he promised to stop wars, not start wars. And yet in the mind of Kent, and you also can look at the extreme right-winger Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trump has fundamentally betrayed the core of what America First, in their view, represented. You can also see other staunch, important MAGA influences breaking with Trump. Joe Rogan. Doesn't Joe Rogan have the biggest podcast audience in America?
Close, yeah.
Close. So certainly one of the very few
biggest.
Joe Rogan. Megyn Kelly, another important influencer. And, right close to the top of the heap, or maybe at the top of the heap, among right-wing influencers, Tucker Carlson called the war disgusting and a mistake. All of these MAGA folks, drank the Kool-Aid for Donald Trump. And they did not understand what America First really meant for Donald Trump and his core loyalists. And that is, no, it did not mean we only focus on the home front and ignore what's going on in the world. No, what it really means, and we've seen this played out now all over the world, Venezuela, Syria, Somalia, now in Iran, what it really means is America is first in the world and has the ability and the moral authority to do whatever it wants. Have you not heard Trump say that? How many times has Trump said that? I'm going to do whatever I want, Sam?
He says it all the time.
All the time. How can you ignore that?
He said it about Cuba yesterday.
I can do whatever I want in Cuba. He said, I can do whatever I want in Iran. I can pick the leader. That's what America First really represents. And it's a horrific image. We haven't really seen anything quite like that since the European powers said we can do anything we want in the underdeveloped world, and we can carve up for our imperial ambitions Africa and Asia. Understand, America First is not what the MAGA loyalists, most of them, think it is. It's the exact opposite. It is not focusing on the home front. It is being America First around the world. And because we're the most powerful, we're the biggest bully, we can do anything that we want. How many times does Donald Trump have to say that before we come to understand and to believe that? And, his loyalist Joe Kemp, his loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, they understand that.
Right. We do have some primary news tonight. Illinois is holding... Our dog is scratching at the door.
Yeah.
Illinois
can be annoying.
Illinois is holding its primary tonight. We're going to check in with some of those races. Dick Durbin's old seat is now up for grabs.
In the Senate, it's not a seat.
What do you mean?
Dick Durbin's the senator. Usually you talk about a seat, it's a district.
Oh.
It's a representative, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. It looks like most of these are too early to call. They're saying that the Senate, that's not a seat. What would I call it? The Senate.
You can, yeah.
You don't call. I
guess
don't think
you
you
can
can call
call
it
it
a seat.
Yeah, all right, fair
The
enough.
Senate seat, which will most likely go to a Dem because it's Illinois. Right now, they're
It's like
saying
95% going to go to a Dem.
right. They're saying it's too close to call. We can check in on this race.
Yeah, I don't know who these people are. I think they're all pretty much mainstream liberal Democrats, but maybe we have some people in our audience from Illinois who could better inform us. But I don't know really what the difference is between these two obvious frontrunners for the Senate.
It says the three major candidates are vying for a nomination: Representative Robin Kelly, Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, and Lieutenant Governor Julius Stratton.
Yeah, I know Krishnamurthy. He's a solid liberal Democrat, very well spoken. I think Julius Stratton is very much in the image of the Governor Pritzker, another down the pipe Democratic liberal. But again, maybe there are people in our audience from Illinois who could better and in a more nuanced way describe these candidates. Robin Kelly looks like she's out of it.
Yeah, it looks like Robin Kelly is out. She only has 19% of the vote. Well, 20% of the vote. Raja Krishnamurthy has 33.1%. Oh, there's a big change. Our dog
went down.
He went down a little bit. Robin Kelly went up a little bit. Robin Kelly is now at 20.1% of the vote.
She's a distant third.
Yeah, she's pretty far back. Raja Krishnamurthy is at 32.9%, and Juliana Stratton, the current lieutenant governor of the state, is at 38.9%.
All right,
but
I'm going to call it.
You are?
I am. He's not going to overcome this lead. I'm calling it for Stratton.
Okay. That seems to be the main
yeah, there are
race
a bunch
tonight.
Of
There's a bunch of house seats
we don't
up.
know who these people are.
I think District 9 is maybe one of the more interesting races that I've seen. This woman, Kat Abug Hazalel. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Oh my goodness, hold on. A dog, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but our dog is going crazy at the door right now.
Can I let him in?
I'll let him in a second. She's big with the Gen Z millennial folk.
Yeah, she is. She kind of a Mandami clone.
Yeah, sort of.
That's my understanding.
She is still.
She's behind
in this
Not
race.
insurmountably, but I don't know who this other person is. Do you?
No.
But she's within striking distance. Yeah, I still have my teeth.
Still have
Kiko, you're a big pain. That's our dog.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's see what percentage of the vote is in. Wow, there's a lot of candidates.
What percentage is in?
80%.
Yeah. So I already called it for Stratton.
And do you think this cat woman can come back or no?
I don't.
Not 5
I'm not
points.
willing to call it. I don't know enough about these local races, but I'd say 90% she's not going to come back.
They're saying in District 2 they've already projected a winner, Miller, Nowak on the Republican side, who has 0% of the vote. Tracy.
I think she's uncontested.
Yeah, I'm just making a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really know the rest of these races. District 7, LaShawn Ford is ahead.
That must be an African-American district.
Yeah. District 8, Melissa Bean is ahead. But
yeah, I don't know who these people are.
And
I'm not aware of any grand ideological clashes among Democrats.
Yeah, I mean,
we all seem to be in the J.B. Pritzker mode.
We have been following a lot of primaries across the country, but Illinois is a pretty blue state, and probably whoever wins on the blue side of these races is going to win the seat pretty easily.
Almost certainly. There may be a couple of seats go Republican, but 80% of the seats are going to go Democratic.
Yeah, this is the really sort of bigger race again, and Juliana Stratton is at 39%.
I already called it.
Oh, you already called it, so I don't even need to go back and review that, huh?
No, you don't.
Okay. Let's move on to our next topic then. How about them apples?
Unless someone in our audience has some further insight to these candidates that we don't have.
Oh, I haven't really been watching the chat.
Yeah, that's all right. We can go on.
A federal judge in Massachusetts blocked Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s recent overhaul of the nation's childhood vaccine schedule, a major blow to his vaccine agenda.
Very important. This is Massachusetts. It's the First Circuit Court of Appeals. It's the most liberal circuit. I think it's 5 Democrats, 1 Republican, something along those lines. So if this goes to the appeals court, this ruling is likely to be upheld. And it's a very righteous ruling. What have we been saying for years now about RFK Jr.'s grip on science, Sam?
He doesn't have one.
Doesn't have one. He's a practitioner of quack science. And what you don't know about science when you're the head of healthcare in America can hurt us a whole lot. And this lawsuit was not brought by, a bunch of liberal activists. It was brought by some of the most prestigious, the most well-established medical and pediatric organizations in the United States, who understands that you cannot set policy that affects the health of our kids, that affects the health of Americans, based on your biases, your prejudices, your grasping for quack science. This is something anyone who has an understanding of how you find truth has fully grasped for some time. And it is of critical importance and of great value to our health, particularly the health of our children, that a federal judge has called this out. And called this out, by the way, in absolutely no uncertain terms. America would be better if Trump had randomly picked a person on the street and put them in head of Health and Human Services than putting RFK Jr., the head of Health and Human Services. That's like opening the door and giving access to the hen house to a family of foxes.
Right. And our final topic before we move on to questions. In a landmark transformation of the American political landscape, a new Gallup survey reveals that more Americans now sympathize with Palestinians than with Israelis. The shift marks the first time since Gallup began tracking the issue in 1967 that Israel has lost its long-standing lead in U.S. public opinion.
This is an astounding turnaround. As the Gallup reported, we haven't seen anything like this in decades. This is a complete 180 turnaround for the American public, particularly among younger people, but also among older people as well. This turnaround is not just limited to the Gen Z crowd. And again, it comports with something we've been saying now literally for months, years on the show. I've told you, you could not find a stauncher supporter of Israel's right to exist and to exist in peace than Samuel and myself. But does not mean...
You don't know anything about my opinions?
Yes, I do. We've talked about it enough. But that does not mean you support any given Israeli government any more than you support any American government, even though you're an American patriot. I don't support the Trump government, and I don't support the Trump-supported, Trump-backed Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu. We've been saying, God knows for how long, that Netanyahu, who is, been indicted as a war criminal, I think with some credibility,
You all right?
I don't have access to all the inside information. Publicly what he's done in Gaza is absolutely horrific. And as I've said so many times, Netanyahu, the Donald Trump of Israel, has turned Israel into an international pariah, completely turned around public opinion on Israel. And we've now seen that horrifically in the United States. All of Netanyahu's bombings and his attacks, his killings, his destruction has turned around world opinion and now, amazingly, U.S. opinion on Israel. And we've also seen it in what Kent had to say, that Donald Trump has been played by this awful leader of Israel, Netanyahu, which is only going to further stoke public opinion against Israel. It's tragic. It's tragic. I don't like to see this as much as I oppose Netanyahu. But, you reap as you sow. And Netanyahu has sowed in one of the most horrific fashions for any leader around the world. Yet Trump seems to embrace him while he wants to kill off all the leaders of Iran, wants to topple the leadership in Cuba, take over Cuba, simply because I can and I can do anything I want. And he has done nothing but support and be played by this equally horrific leader, Netanyahu, in Israel. And you got to understand, all of this extreme right-wing support for Israel is not because they love the Jews and want to support the Jews. These are the same folks, a lot of them, who say God doesn't answer Jewish prayers. Nothing to do with that. Read my 2008 book, White Protestant Nation, The Rise of the American Conservative Movement. I explain in great depth why the extreme right wing supports Israel, because they believe that Israeli control of Israel and the Middle East more broadly, as we saw the Trump ambassador to Israel say, yes, Israel should take over the Middle East. They believe that Israel control over this region is essential for Armageddon. You know what Armageddon is, Sam?
Yes.
The final battle of good and evil and the second coming of Christ. And what's going to happen to the Jews, Sam, in the second coming of Christ?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. Either they convert to Christianity or they're damned forever to torment in hell. So don't for one moment think that right-wing support for Israel means that that is in the best interest of the Jewish people and doesn't portend, I don't buy into any of this, but in their ideology doesn't portend a horrific fate for the Jewish people.
All right, with that, we will move on to our question portion of the show. We have over 1,000 people watching, but only 300 likes. Make sure you like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. Questions go to members and donators.
Yes, we don't look like we have many donations, do we?
I haven't checked.
I haven't checked, but we seem to be lagging. A lot goes into the show. The networks, the cable outlets, they spend millions to put on their shows. We offer something different and I think in many ways superior. And we do this on a shoestring, and we depend on your donations and your membership.
We were watching CNN before this, and who was on? Rahm Emanuel was on blobbing about something. That dude, I'm sorry, that guy. The people they have on, they had John Bolton and then Rahm Emanuel.
And you know what they're going to say?
Who wants to hear from those guys anyways?
Yeah, they're totally predictable. We watch these outlets all the time. And how often do we get new insights or anything new and interesting?
Other than breaking news, you don't really get much of anything.
Right. Which is just reporting.
Right.
They have great value as straight reporting. But all this blah, blah.
Right. They just have a bunch of political people on who are entrenched in their ideology, are going to say whatever matches their own political interests. Like, it doesn't serve the people at all.
No, we know in advance what John Bolton or Rahm Emanuel's going to say.
Right.
They've been around for decades. Their positions are well laid out, and they're not going to say anything contrary to their interests.
Right. With that, our great friend George Politis did donate, and they asked a question.
George Politis is one of our greatest friends.
They say, Professor, is Trump trying to use any excuse to overuse his presidential power? For example, this war with Iran.
Absolutely 100%. As I've said, you don't have to take my word for it. Just listen to what Trump says. He's always out front. That's the thing about Trump. He's not hidden. He's not secret. He's not subtle. What he's going to do, he tells you right out front. And how many times has he said, as president, I can do anything I want, And he applies that not just to the United States, but to the entire world. Think about that, Sam. He believes he can do anything he wants with no constraints, no restraints anywhere in the world. And absolutely, he believes this is not an extension, but a logical use of presidential power and a clear demonstration of presidential power while he kicks sand in the face of an absolutely impotent Congress. How often has the Congress checked any of Trump's excesses, including this undeclared, unauthorized war in Iran?
I don't think they've done anything to check him.
No, they've totally left the building. It's the most ineffective, the most cowardly Congress I think we've ever had in this country.
Our next question is from Def Leppard Rules Rock. They say, with the war happening, do you think Trump is an isolationist at this point? His isolationist base must be extraordinarily disappointed at this point.
He is absolutely not an isolationist. And isolationism is a badly misused and badly understood terms. Let's go back to the origins of the America First movement. You know, in the first explicit America First movement got going, Sam?
30s?
Yes, right before World War II. And you would think these people are isolationists. That is, they want nothing to do with the world. They don't want any wars. They want to build a shell around the United States and just focus domestically. Wrong, wrong, wrong. They are much like Trump. They did not want to go to war with the Nazis because they thought that was the wrong war. You know who the chief spokesperson for America First was, Sam?
Charles Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh, America's hero, the second best recognized American after President Franklin Roosevelt. He made it very clear. America First had nothing to do with isolationism. He said, and again, this is all in my book, my 2008 book, White Protestant Nation, The Rise of the American Conservative Movement, and again in my most recent book, Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism. What Lindbergh said explicitly was, this was the wrong war. We don't want a war fighting against other white Christian nations. And he used those terms. Very racist, very white Christian nationalist. He said, one of the reasons we don't want to do this is when we want to preserve our manpower and our firepower to fight against the real enemy, the communists, particularly the communists from Russia and the East. And a lot of these old isolationists were the first to support a vigorous, warlike approach to international communism, totally different than their opting out from fighting the Nazis. So, you know, America Firsters have never really been isolationists. That's a complete misnomer.
We got a big donation from Michelle F3S. Thank you so much, Michelle. They say, thank you, Professor Lichtman and Sam. Always great conversation and education. Well, thank you to Michelle.
Thanks.
Our next
tried to give you some education on what isolationism
I learned
does
something.
and doesn't mean.
Yeah, I just learned something.
Thank you.
This is a question from Andrew Carlson. Professor, you've mentioned a few times that you're considering modifying the keys. Without asking for predictions, could you clarify which specific areas of the keys you're evaluating for changes?
Well, obviously the two economic keys. Sam and I have talked about this a lot, and we're not sure, you know, in recent years, gross domestic product may or may not be the best indicator. So I'm definitely considering a reevaluation there. You know, yes, I was wrong about 2024. I still maintain my record is 10-1, unsurpassed, you know, by any other forecaster by far, maybe because I've just lived longer than any of the others that have been doing this for 45 years. But I've also said, and this is ignored entirely by people who only care whether I'm right or wrong, that, you know, I'm not Gene Dixon with a crystal ball. I'm not Mike Johnson who claims the Almighty speaks to him. I'm an historian, and my system is based on a study of history. It's very robust, because retrospectively it goes all the way back to 1860 and prospectively all the way back to 1984. But historical patterns change. And, I'm going to talk about this at great length on an upcoming presentation on the keys. But I think there have been some fundamental changes recently that may have altered the pattern of history. Stay tuned. I'm going to talk about that in depth.
This is from member Marzim, who also sent a donation. Thank you. Hi, Dr. Lichtman. Do you think Trump can actually get out of this mess with Iran?
He could. He could, this is what Senator Aiken said we should have done a long time ago in Vietnam. Declared victory and gotten out. It would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of problems if we had done that. Look, Trump is calling all the shots here, so to speak, or the non-shots. Absolutely, he can get out at any time. But the problem is, how clear has he been about his thinking and what his plans are for this war and the end game?
Trump being clear about his thinking?
Yes. Can you imagine?
Has that ever happened?
Talk about an oxymoron. So we have no idea, what his plans are for the end game of this war, how we're going to disengage, under what conditions, and what it's going to mean. Clearly, they've devastated a lot of Iran's military capacity at the price of killing a lot of people, including civilians, including those 150 plus schoolgirls in the school in Iran. These are not it's not just collateral damage. These are real human beings, living, breathing human beings whose life has been horrifically cut short in pursuit of some unclear, unfathomable objective that Trump has yet to lay us. The first time we've fought a war that I can remember or that I've studied without any kind of clear plan or objective. So yes, he can get out at any time, but who knows?
Right. $25 donation from Brian Gilbert. Thank you so much, Brian. They said, good evening, Lichtmans. Thanks for what you two do.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for tuning in. This is from member Andrew of 8UQ. Just dropped my phone. Hey, Professor, I was wondering what your thoughts on the GOP souring on J.D. Vance in favor of Marco Rubio running for president.
This is important.
Oh.
The souring on J.D. Vance is because somehow, some way, for the first time, he's actually said what he believes. Remember, he used to be one of the strongest critics of Trump. I believe at one point he even compared him to being like a Hitler, if I remember correctly. But certainly he was a very powerful critic of Trump. And he's broken his neck to turn it around 180 degrees to suck up to whatever Trump wants, except on the war. He seems to be the only high official in the Trump administration who's expressed skepticism and doubts about this venture. Unlike Marco Rubio, who's so blackened his soul it must be falling into ash at this point. And so that has indeed, to some extent, soured the MAGA movement on Vance. Not entirely. Remember, Vance had a huge lead in the polls, whatever it means at this early point, over Marco Rubio. But those of us who would like to see regime change in the United States, a fight between J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio would certainly move us closer to that end, because one of the critical keys that determine the outcome of elections is an internal party battle for the nomination of the incumbent party. Under those conditions, the incumbent party almost never wins. Look at Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders in 2016. Clinton versus Obama. No, that was not the in party, but all the fighting among the Republicans in 2008 to succeed Donald Trump.
What? You said
not to succeed George W. Bush.
Yeah.
I always get these two mixed up for good reason. Or, the Kennedy challenge to Jimmy Carter in 1980, or the Ronald Reagan challenge to Gerald Ford in 1976. What happened to the candidate of the Republican Party, Sam, after all these internal battles?
They lose.
They lost every single one of them.
This is a $5 donation from Gish Gallop is a real
All right.
word. They say, I feel like prominent MAGA figures, Tucker Carlson, MTG, etc., care more about broken campaign promises than the base. Will they all go the way of Liz Cheney?
Very astute observation. You know, they're following these things much more closely than the base. The base so far has basically acquiesced to whatever Trump wants. Trump wants this, we'll line up behind them. There have been some minor signs of cracking. You know, his support among Republicans has slipped a little bit, but so far the base has just shown their inclination to follow Donald Trump no matter what, as opposed to some of these MAGA influences like Tucker Carlson, who have agendas of their own, not necessarily perfectly lined up with Trump's. No, I don't think they're going to go as far as Liz Cheney, but already they have been important critics of the Iranian war.
I don't think the media, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, they're not going anywhere. They have their own base, sort of.
No, Joe Rogan, they're not going anywhere.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is, I think, already gone. I think she has no political career left.
Liz Cheney is already gone, Adam Kinzinger. But remember, these folks, they're not politicians. They, as you say, they have their own base outside of electoral politics.
Right.
So they're not dependent on Donald Trump the way Liz Cheney was. And of course, she got wiped out when Trump endorsed her opponent in the primary.
Wyatt Hamilton is saying that Stratton is officially the winner of the Senate race.
We were first to call it again, right?
You're a smart guy, Dad.
Yep.
This is from member Brian Sheehan. Do you think Trump has dementia/Alzheimer's, and do you believe that the White House is suppressing how bad it is?
Look, what have we said many times about our expertise, Sam? What are we not?
Doctors.
We are not doctors. We are not medical professionals. We are not in a position to analyze Donald Trump's health. I can simply say, as a layperson, whatever it's worth, and it's worth no more than any other layperson, except I probably follow these things more closely than most people. I am alarmed by Donald Trump's mental acuity. All his gaffes, all his mistakes seem to be, to me, to be pretty significant. But I cannot possibly give you a medical diagnosis.
I've been concerned about Donald Trump's mental acuity since he came down the escalator in 2015.
That's a good point.
I don't know. Whether he
predicting, Donald Trump's mental collapse is like predicting his demise in politics.
Right. Do you think Jesse Ventura would have been successful at the national level, or was his appeal limited to Minnesota?
I think he probably would have had trouble. Jesse Ventura is the former wrestler who turned governor as an independent of Minnesota. Minnesota, as we know, has very special politics. And I think that Jesse Ventura probably would not have been able to translate it to the national level. But, I don't like to speculate.
Right. This is from Diane Kastner. My father, who collected presidential memorabilia, left me a Currier and Ives portrait of James K. Polk. I looked him up, but would love to know your thoughts about him.
I have a forthcoming book. It's coming out in September, Bancroft Press, called Great American Presidents. And my most controversial call is James K. Polk. He was a one-term president, the only one-term president that I include in that list. He's very controversial because he fought this horrible racist war, the Mexican-American War, but he is one of the most significant American presidents, whether you like what he did or not. What was the result of the Mexican War for American territory, Sam? You know?
I'm assuming the United States won.
And we got vast swaths of territory. California, parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, much of the Southwest was the result of the Mexican War, which was fought on pretext, was horribly racist, but the result was extraordinarily significant. And then without firing a shot, James K. Polk also settled a dispute with Great Britain over the Northwest Territory, where you should draw the line between Canada and the United States. He settled that, and that led to the creation of what today are the states of Washington and Oregon. So put it all together, and he basically doubled the size of the United States. Also, greatly accelerated the controversy over slavery because the Mexican War was 46, 47. After that, there was an enormous controversy that contributed to the Civil War of the fate of slavery in these new territories.
Right.
Where else are you going to get that kind of analysis on James K. Polk? You get it from the cable companies?
No shot. This is from member Dirtier Dog.
Oh, yeah, one of our good friends.
They say, how do you think FDR's New Deal programs could have been even better? Where are the flaws and how would you improve?
Well, you know I don't like to speculate, but one of the things that people have criticized FDR's program is they relied on progressive taxes, like Social Security. And I think, the taxation program could have been better under FDR. I also think, and this was not his fault. Remember, FDR wasn't a dictator. He had to get his program through Congress. We could have had a more comprehensive program of government assistance that extended more broadly to Americans than the GI Bill, which was wonderful, but, it focused on former members of the armed forces, overwhelmingly male, pretty much left out women, and was not a comprehensive program to aiding all Americans, like, for example, they had in Great Britain.
Right. This is from, we'll do 2 more questions. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
The Lichtman Live Post Show is on tonight, so
Wow.
stay tuned for
And
my
I just
channel.
again want to, before we close, wish happy birthday to Karen Strickler,
Right.
Sam's mom, my wife, and who was a silver medalist in powerlifting in the Senior Olympics.
We
10
have
pounds short of gold.
we have 580 likes. Let's see if we can get to 8 or 600 likes by the end
We should
of
be able to.
the show. This is from member Patrick Murray.
Oh, one of our great friends.
With a very conservative administration and a stubborn Democratic Party in Congress, how was Reagan able to befriend Tip O'Neill and establish an, quote, after 6 p.m. rule? What steps can current governments take to return to this civility?
It would take a sea change.
What's that? What was the after
Yeah,
6 p.m. rule?
The relationship between the Speaker of the House and Ronald Reagan. But that wasn't the key to Reagan's ability to pass his big tax cuts, what he called his riverboat gamble. Although there's much been made about the relationship between Tip and Speaker of the House and Ronald Reagan, particularly from Chris Matthews, who wrote a book about it. The really critical thing was not that. It was the conservative Southern Democrats, known as the boll weevils, after the insect that devastated cotton plants in the South. Reagan would not have been able to get Reaganomics through the Congress because Republicans did not control the House. They controlled the Senate, if not for the support from the boll weevil Southern Democrats. Tip O'Neill, a brilliant politician, understood that. And that's why he did not simply futilely engage in burnt earth policies against Reagan.
All right, our final question of the evening before we end Lichtman Live and the Lichtman Live post show starts. This is from our resident Giant fan, James LaGruta. What advice would you have for a prospective book author?
Yes. Several things. First of all, you've got to understand the theme of your book. What is it that you are trying to get across in your book? Are you simply trying to be entertaining? Are you trying to introduce some revolutionary new ideas? Are you trying to present factual material that hasn't been presented before? Are you trying to synthesize different interpretations of an event? Those are examples of 4 different purposes for writing a book. Doesn't mean they're watertight and you can't have more than one, but you're not going to have a successful book unless you decide what its object is. Then the second thing that's critical is you have to decide who your audience is. Are you after a scholarly audience? Are you after a general audience? Again, I'm assuming we're talking about nonfiction. If you're writing nonfiction, are you looking to a broad scholarly audience or a more specialized group of scholars? Then you got to figure out how to sell your book. Can you get an agent? Trade publishers won't even consider a manuscript without an agent. If you don't have an agent, you're a first-time author, my advice to you would be to go to the university presses. There are dozens of university presses that are more open to unknown authors and authors without agents. Doesn't mean you necessarily can break through there, but that's a better route than the trade route.
All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. The Lichtman Live post show comes up on my channel right after this. Shout out to some of our donators: DCause, Marzum, Secular Monk, CD No Handle, OBS7789, Black Hero, Turbid, Mr. Showbon, Free Throw Guy, Andy Haas, J Murda, and Sherry Laurie.
Wonder if that's my old friend Sherry from AU, who's now a physician.
Sherry, are you his old friend from AU who's now a physician?
Sherry Lauer, I think, not Lowry though.
Lowry, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Dad. What are your final words to the people tonight?
My most important words are happy birthday, Karen Strickler. We love you. And stay tuned. We have another show on Thursday. Oh my God! I've gotten confused. The days are clipping by so fast, and we'll continue to provide for you in these momentous times. And don't understate how momentous they are for you. Historical perspective analysis you won't find anywhere else.
No doubt. You don't want to listen to Rahm Emanuel and John Bolton. You want to listen to this guy. Trust me. All right, folks. See you in the post show. Say good night, Dad.
Good night.